Welcome to the Faith Together podcast from the Center for Faith and Family at Olivet Nazarene University. If you believe that passing down Christian faith is essential for the next generation, you are in the right place. Enjoy conversations with guests who are faith practitioners, parents, caregivers, pastors, counselors, and many more. You'll enjoy practical tools and community for passing down Christian faith to your children and grandchildren. Welcome and thank you for joining us as we continue our series on healthy parenting. I am Leon Blanchette and I'm here with my co-host Lindsay. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Leon. And hey, everybody. So glad you're joining us for this important series and conversation.
Yeah, this has been fun as we've had a chance to talk to some people who live in the world of helping parents be healthy.
I love it because it takes all of us.
Yeah,
That's
it
why
really does.
we say faith together. It's important.
Right. So today we have a special guest who's a friend of ours. Her name is Dr. Lisa Gassin, and she's a professor at Olivet. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. Good to be here.
We're so glad to have you.
Yeah, absolutely glad to have you with us. So Lisa is a professor of psychology at Olivet, and she's got quite an extensive set of credentials here. She has a Bachelor of Science in Human Development from the University of California at Davis. She also has a master's degree from Purdue in Educational Sciences and a PhD in Educational Psychology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And as if that wasn't enough, she has a master's degree from Governor State University in Marriage and Family Counseling. So that's pretty extensively. So you've been busy studying.
Lots of studying, and in the last 10 years or so since I graduated from Governor's, more applying out in the real world, I guess you might say.
That's good. And so you are a licensed clinical professional counselor, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, and that has led you to doing family therapy?
Yeah, so the program I went to at Governor's was in marriage and family counseling, and I worked part-time in agencies working mainly with families and children for the better part of 10 years.
Wow, that's great. So we've asked Lisa to join us because let me just give you a little bit of history of kind of how this came about. So Lisa was a part of the original research group for this project, for the Center for Faith and Family, and she really helped us to understand some of the psychological concerns as we think about helping kids adopt the faith of their parents and make it real in their own lives. And that was an important thing to us. And I remember a conversation, Lisa, that you and I had where you came to me and you said, you know, all the things that you want to do to help parents are really, really important and good, but without healthy parents, there might be some struggles there. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of led us to this series. And then you started talking about the importance of the relationship that parents have with their children and the importance of that being healthy as far as passing on the faith.
Right.
So maybe talk a little bit about that with us and give us a sense of why a healthy parent-child relationship is so important in passing on faith.
Okay, well, should we start from just the basic question of what a healthy relationship looks like?
Yeah,
I guess?
Sure.
That would be helpful.
Okay, great. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and I guess I should preface all of this by saying that, you know, as you said, my training is in psychology, and so I will be speaking mainly kind of from that perspective. And we'll, of course, try to integrate faith to the degree that I can, but I'm going to be sharing with you a lot from the field of psychology in particular. And I think the research on healthy parenting, healthy parent-child relationships is moderately clear, which we can't often say when it comes to research, and that's that there's really two fundamental parts to healthy parenting. The first of those parts, not surprisingly, is love. One of my favorite psychologists, a guy named Yuri Bronfenbrenner, said that the main thing a child needs is to have somebody in that child's life who is just crazy about that child. And I think that conveys what our love for our children is really like. But, I mean, love exists on a variety of levels. There's a physical way to express love in terms of hugging and caressing and looking into each other's eyes. Of course, there are behavioral ways, playing with children, and also, I think it's really important that parents are able to understand what their child is experiencing and show that child that they understand and respect that experience.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So love is one element. Another element is structure. And that can look different. You know, depending on the family circumstances, perhaps first and foremost, it's being sure that you have a safe and predictable environment. And then also, depending on the age and stage of children, having certain expectations for them that you're very clear about and that are reasonable, and following through on maintaining those expectations.
Yeah, I love that, because I think that's so practical when we think about working and living and loving children, having both of those pieces in place, love and structure. And Lisa, would you say, depending on the age of the child, would you recommend more love, more structure? Would you say it needs to be a balance at each age? Or what's your experience with that as far as age levels go?
I think that's an important question, because children grow and change, and so things might look different at different periods of time. I think probably the safest answer is that they're always both present in healthy parenting, but what they look like, and as you kind of indicated, the balance might change. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if you've got a 3-month-old, that's mostly love, mm-hmm. right? Meeting the child's need, getting up at 3 a.m. to feed them, showing that you see that they're uncomfortable with 2 blankets, so taking that 1 blanket off. But there's still a structure element as well. We still want their environments to be safe and predictable. That might change, though, as a child grows.
Yeah. So it's almost like there is a balance to it, but there's almost a rhythm to it, too, based mm-hmm. on their developmental phase.
Yeah, and there's consistency as well. I mean, as a child grows, you have a toddler and a kid in elementary school and things like that. You are still doing a lot of those physical expressions of love, hugging and things like that, if the child receives that well. Mm-hmm. But you start to set verbally your expectations for the child as a part of structure, and hopefully express those clearly, set reasonable expectations. Love may also look a little bit different than it did earlier, in that you might do a lot of play with the child. As you express that you understand what they're feeling and thinking, that might take a lot of work on your part to get back into the mindset of a 5-year-old. I mean, for a 5-year-old, a broken toy might be the end of the world. And as parents, we know, I can go buy another one. It's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. But to that 5-year-old, it's huge. And to be able to sympathize with that is an important part of
part of loving kids is entering their worlds.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's really good that we understand kind of those two parts and the balance, and as you said, Lindsay, the rhythm that we get in that. So that's all well and good. So the whole focus of this podcast is to give thought to how do we help parents in the faith development through that process. So what does that look like when it comes to faith? Now, I know earlier you said you're going to look at this from the field of psychology, but I know you're a church woman.
Yes.
You're involved in the life of the church, and you've been engaged in the life of kids from a spiritual perspective. So I know you have insight here. So help us with that.
Sure. So, I mean, in talking about those two elements, love and structure, most of the psychological work that is out there is focused on the benefit for children really more psychologically. So in terms of, mental health and social behaviors and things like that. That being said, I think we can take our personal experience and also a subset of the research that's out there actually on faith development. And both of those suggest that these two things, love and structure, contribute to a healthy parent-child relationship or healthy bond or attachment between the parent and the child, which then is an important motivator for the child to take on the values and the beliefs of the parent. Parents do well, very well, when they take their children to church and when they read scripture at home and pray before meals and pray before bed. That's very important. But those overt aspects to, I'm just going to use a social science term, religious socialization, right? To trying to pass on the faith. Those overt or obvious parts of it are kind of written on a wider canvas, or they are seeds planted into a soil. And that soil or that canvas is really how the family functions and what the parent-child attachment or bond is like. The research is pretty clear that children are more likely to internalize or take into themselves, adopt for their own, the parent's values when love and structure and a good parent-child relationship is intact. There's research that suggests that children are also specifically more likely to take on their parents' religious convictions when that's the case. That's the positive side of the coin. Unfortunately, there's a negative side of the coin too, and there is a glimmer in the research that suggests that when the family is not functioning well, when the parent-child bond is not healthy, children are less likely to take on what the parent believes.
Wow, that's significant. And for the work that we're trying to do, wow, that goes a long ways when we talk to parents and helping them consider that the work that they're doing to teach them Scripture, to take them to church, to try to help them to be a follower of Christ, that all of that can be undone when the relationships are not healthy.
Yeah. I do want to, I think you said that very well. I do want to, however, say that it's important that we use kind of tentative language when we talk about this. I've been saying things like, increase the chances that they'll take on your beliefs, or, decrease the likelihood. Unfortunately, we don't have a recipe book, right? And there are no guarantees. We can, and I'm sure we all know families where this has happened, where the parents have done everything quote unquote right, and one of the children has gone off in a different direction.
Sure.
So when we talk about helping parents to form a good bond, a healthy bond with their child, we're talking about increasing the likelihood that the children will want to absorb the belief system of the parent. But unfortunately, it's not a guarantee.
Yeah, thanks for that clarity, because I think that's important. And sometimes I forget that. I live in a world where things are, you try to be a little more definitive about them. But I think that's a good caution.
And I just don't want any parents out there to be discouraged, because,
Right, sure.
you in all likelihood are doing a lot of great things.
Absolutely.
And those things will benefit your child, and they'll benefit your child's faith development. But children, most, I think, theological traditions believe that we have at least some degree of free will, and I believe children have free will, and they are also influenced by other things outside of the family. I would argue the family is probably the biggest influence, but there are still other influences.
Yeah, and Lisa, I have a question about the love and the structure. Would you say that when that love and that structure is provided consistently in a child's life, that builds trust?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Builds trust with their caretaker, their parent, whoever it is that's providing those things to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about some of the things we've talked about, we can think about trust in a couple of different ways. If a parent is consistently showing a child, I understand what you're experiencing and I respect that, of course, then the child knows that they can trust the parent. Likewise, if we talk about structure and the parent says, if you have, 3 or more C's on your report card, I'm going to have to take away your electronics for a week so that we can get you back on task. And the parent actually follows through on that. Well, I'm going to trust what mom says because she does it. So both love and structure, I think, can really improve the trust.
Yeah, I just wanted to point that out because I think that there's a lot of you listening right now that as you are providing love to your child or you're providing structure, it can become discouraging because you get caught up in the mundane. Right? This is just the everyday things that I do. Is it really making a difference? Me sticking to what I say I'm going to do? Me having that extra playtime with them at night? Do those things really matter from day to day? I'm exhausted. I don't want to take the time, but it does. It matters so deeply. And I just want to share that with our listeners today, that what you're doing in the everyday with your children matters so much. You're building that trust for these bigger conversations down the road.
Yeah. And when I'm talking with clients, I often, this is maybe a very, talk about mundane analogy, but building relationships is like having a healthy diet. It's got to be a day in, day out, and it's, choosing the salad over the donut.
Why do we have to do that? The donuts are so good.
But the payoff is amazing. Moreover, when we're talking about relationships rather than our own bodies.
Right. And I think part of our purpose and mission here at the Faith Together podcast is that we want parents to see that every part of life is connected to our faith in some way.
Yep.
That it all matters, right, Leon? Like it all
absolutely
works together.
Yeah.
Okay, well, another question I have, Lisa, as we're talking through these things is, what if things have gotten off track in the parent-child relationship? So there's not been that love and structure and the trust built in ways that they would have intended for there to be, or maybe there's been some trauma, or there's been things that have taken place to put some disunity in the relationship. Is there hope? How do we move forward?
Yeah. Such an important question. I would have to say the answer is a resounding yes. I mean, there's always hope. I think that psychologists would say that, and I think as Christians, we absolutely have to say that. I mean, the Holy Spirit is always active and always asking us to, sound like I'm giving a sermon, but always inviting us to cooperate with him to spread holiness, basically. Yeah, no. So I think there definitely is always hope. If it's okay, there's a couple of principles I have in mind that I think can put more kind of flesh on that skeleton. First of all is that the principle that it's better to act sooner rather than later. Families are full of very imperfect people, and there are going to be bad days, and a bad day is to be expected. A bad week is probably to even be expected. But if a parent finds that the parent-child relationship is not working, whatever that means in that particular context, that there are frustrations and struggles that they are not coping with regularly for weeks on end, it's probably time to appeal to outside help. And there's no shame in that. I mean, what child came with an instruction manual? None, right?
So true.
Yeah. I mean, what life comes with an instruction manual? We have scripture, of course, but that doesn't necessarily teach us every single decision we should make regarding our interpersonal struggles. And so and when I say appeal for outside help, I don't necessarily mean going to a therapist, although I'll address that in just a second, perhaps, but even just talking to a pastor or reaching out to a wiser friend. Yeah. So, reaching out can be an important part. I would also, kind of along the same lines, regarding earlier the better, if you're not a parent yet, or if you have very, very small children and you're thinking, well, this will be an issue for years down the road, don't delay, I guess is my message. You can start working on yourself. You can start working on other relationships in your life with your spouse, with your own parents, and all of that will be beneficial for your time in raising your children. So even as a young person, maybe you're not even married. I mean, it's not too early to start preparing yourself and your future family for your parent-child relationships. I do want to talk, if I might, just for a second about therapy as well. I guess another principle would be don't hesitate to seek professional help if you or somebody you respect really thinks that it would be helpful for you. The younger folks who are hearing our voices may not have grown up with this stereotype, but I think there was a stereotype for older generations that psychologists and other forms of therapists are anti-religion and will try to dissuade you of your beliefs. And there may well have been a time when that was somewhat likely, but believe me, nowadays therapists are trained to be respectful of client value systems. And so even if you end up with a therapist who's not a Christian, and there are plenty of Christian therapists around in most places, but if you have a therapist who's not a Christian, they should not be dissuading you. If for some reason they are, go find another therapist. But most therapists will be supportive of whatever your worldview happens to be.
Yeah, I think those are good words. I think you're right, Lisa. I kind of grew up with that stigma. Yeah. And so it's nice for us to be able to affirm for others that that's a good alternative, a good route to take if that's needed. I know in my own life, when I was much younger, I saw therapists, and it made a significant difference in my life, dealing with some childhood issues. Yep. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that with us.
And it's important for the kids in our lives to see that mom, dad, caregiver, whoever it might be, needs help. I mean, it shows that they're willing to receive that help, and I think it gives the child the permission to ask for help too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So here's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing you say that love and structure, pretty important in the process of developing relationships, and that investing in building that relationship is well worth the time and the effort and the work that it takes if we're wanting to pass our faith on to our children. And along with that it is never too late to step in and to try to work toward bringing healing to relationships that might be broken for one reason or another.
Absolutely.
So I know for many of us, we're struggling with relationships. Maybe you have a relationship with a child right now or with a parent that is not what you wish it would be. It is never too late to stop and say, okay, rather than allowing this to continue to be the way it's been, I'm going to step in and I'm going to be the first one to try to make things better.
Absolutely.
And I think that's honoring to Christ. I think that's what the gospel calls us to when Jesus says we're to love God with all of our hearts and our souls and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. Our neighbor includes our own family. Mm-hmm. And so I think we have an opportunity here to bring healing in those ways, and it will pay dividends if we decide to go down that road.
Mm-hmm. I think it's so important that we take the time to recognize how valuable the family relationships are in our life. Sometimes they're easy to take for granted.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Very easy to take for granted. So this is a reminder to me to look at my own life and take that time to speak into those relationships that we love.
Lisa, as we wrap this up, is there anything else you'd like to share with us as we come to a conclusion?
Gosh, I don't think so. Leon, I think you summarized it beautifully.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you being a part of our journey with us. And we want to encourage you to focus in on those relationships that might need mending. And we wish you the very best and God's blessing. May the Lord bless you, keep you, and give you peace. You've been listening to the Faith Together podcast from the Center for Faith and Family at Olivet Nazarene University. Sign up for additional resources at centerff.com. When building faith, we are better together.